I would imagine would show up, more quickly, in a larger fish that's accumulating, quite a bit of these toxins compared to, a smaller fish. But I mean, my opinion is that any Pacific fish you would want to stay away from, any seafood, because it's being bathed, in these radioactive materials, and it's not something that, if you are concerned about health, you would necessarily want to ingest.
Mm-hmm. We are what we eat, right? So if something is contaminated, that gets put into our system, and it's going to be part of us as well, right?
Exactly.
And speaking of bathing, how about just going into the Pacific Ocean? Here in California, people love to go to the beach. People love to go in the waves and surfing. And are we putting ourselves at risk just dipping into the Pacific Ocean at the beach?
I don't have specific, scientific, information on that, but I would just say common sense would indicate that you would not want to be bathing, in a radioactive pool, essentially. And I mean, there are two ways, with the iodine 129, which is that was the focus of the article that I wrote about, because it has such an extremely long half-life, and you just don't hear about it as much. I mean, you hear about, the iodine, 131, which has, a very short half-life, but it also causes, health disorders that we see fairly quickly. Because it's throwing off, these beta particles very rapidly, and so it affects the body fairly quickly. But with iodine 129, that accumulates in the environment, and it has, it's not throwing off these beta particles as quickly, but over the long term, it's accumulating in the environment, and then that gets into our food supply, not just obviously the fish, but, with milk and any kind of dairy products, meat, and into the vegetables that can get onto it topically. But as far as bathing in the ocean, you can be breathing in these particles, from the sea spray. That's one way that it can enter the body, and then also transdermally through the skin. And then, of course, if you're drinking the seawater, you're ingesting it that way.
That's true.
So I mean, personally, I wouldn't recommend it. And I think that people that are going into the ocean are just not aware of what's really happening here, that it's just heavily contaminated.
And Carolanne, speaking of half-lives, that indicates how long this remains dangerous to humans. And it seems like with radiation, the more complex the life, the more susceptible of harm there is. And the human body is pretty complex.
Sure.
This will be a lifetime thing, or generations type of danger here in the West Coast?
Well, the half-life of the iodine 129 it's close to 16 million years. So it has just an outrageous, my understanding of a half-life is how long. I mean, that's only half, of the time that it takes for it to, throw off this radiation. So it's just a completely new way of life, really, what we're looking at. I mean, this is not something that's going to go away in a few months, like, with iodine 131, which is the very serious, radioactive iodine that, the government tends to, be concerned about, although they don't express that concern to us a lot of times. That will stabilize into your average iodine within a couple of months. and so it doesn't accumulate in the environment like the iodine 129.
Wow, this is a lot to digest, no pun intended, because this affects our lives, particularly here on the West Coast, immensely, and to get the word out and then to get people to believe it, Carolanne.
Right.
Because it would radically change our lives, and when I read about tuna, okay, we're not bringing tuna into the house. Now I've read about, hey, it's affected the entire sea population. So, hey.
Or going to the beach.
Yeah, or going to the beach even. And that's a bummer because it's one of the biggest draws out here in Southern California, the beach.
Right.
This is going to be kind of a hard sell, especially if the government's in denial, right? Until people maybe start getting really sick and dropping dead in numbers.
Well, and that's the thing, is that people tend to be, not to overly generalize, I would say that the average person, because of fear and people have a lot of stress in their lives these days, and they don't want one more thing to have to worry about. And so there's a lot of denial. And like I said to you earlier, there are two camps. I mean, it's a very controversial topic. And you have the camp that says, well, where are the scientists that are coming forward, saying that this is really a problem? Where's our government? Where are the experts that are alerting us to this hazard? And then you have the other camp where it's like, well, let's look at what's really happening here, and put the pieces together, and then make a decision for ourselves. And so I think everyone just really needs to clearly look at what's happening, do their own research, and find the truth. And then you have writers that are